Hi, this is Fuad Abasov, a broker with Right at Home Realty, and this is your monthly real estate statistics. Welcome back to another Toronto real estate market update. Today, we're diving into what went down across the GTA in April 2025. And let me tell you, it was anything but your typical spring market. Sales are down and inventory is up. Forget bidding wars and lineups at open houses. This April, we saw some of the slowest sales numbers in nearly 3 decades. But the full story? Way more interesting. So let's break it down. Across the Greater Toronto area, we had just 5,600 homes sold. That's a drop of 23% compared to last year. Meanwhile, listings exploded, with nearly 19,000 new properties hitting the market. That's one of the highest April inventory levels we've seen in years. So if you're a buyer, there's never been a better time to take your time and negotiate. Let's start with Freehold Homes. Detached homes are still feeling the weight of higher interest rates. An average price? Around $1.43 million, down about 5.6% compared to last year. But interestingly, semi-detached homes are holding up a little better, especially in family-friendly areas with great schools. Same with townhouses, although builders in suburbs are now offering crazy incentives just to move inventory, offering cashbacks, free upgrades, or even temporary mortgage rate buy-downs. It's a buyer's market all around. Now, let's talk condos, and trust me, this segment is splitting in two. Investor condos, especially the smaller ones under 500 square feet, they're struggling. Plenty of supply, rents are soft, carrying costs are high, and a lot of owners are looking to sell or assign before their mortgages renew. But the larger end-user condos, let's say 2 bedrooms or units of 700 square feet and up, are holding steady. Families priced out of freeholds are looking here instead. And on the luxury end, say $2 million plus, Yorkville and Forest Hill condos are still doing surprisingly well, mostly with cash buyers who aren't affected by interest rates. Rents in Toronto have finally started to cool down and they aren't what they used to be. Condo rents dropped about 3% year over year, and almost 2/3 of buildings are now offering incentives like 1 or 2 months free. So if you're an investor counting on rent increases to cover your mortgage, it's time to rerun your numbers. What's happening with the luxury market? Believe it or not, homes over $4 million are still selling, quietly, off market, and often for full ask. Rosedale, Forest Hill, Bridle Path, all still attracting local business owners, old money, and returning expats. Even Leslieville is seeing some heat in the luxury modern infill space. Who would have thought? A quick lightning round on what's happening outside the core in 905 and surrounding markets. Durham is still strong. First-time buyers love the affordability and GO train access. Halton is all about move-over buyers from Toronto. Peel region, especially Brampton and Caledon, has a growing pile of new builds and some aggressive builder incentives. York region, if it's modern and renovated, it's still moving, but the rest is sitting longer. So here's the big question: where's the market heading? Short term, prices might keep drifting slightly lower, especially for condos and suburban detached. Medium term, if inflation keeps cooling, we could see a Bank of Canada rate cut by summer. That could help boost confidence, especially for move-up buyers. But this year, it's not going to be a roller coaster. It's going to be a slow and bumpy ride. More of a buyer's market, more negotiation room, and less FOMO. What you should do right now, buyers. You've got options, be picky, negotiate price, closing terms, consider asking for closing credits or rate buy-downs. Sellers, price it sharp, not based on 2022 highs. Those days are gone. Presentation matters like never before. Refresh home prior to sale, add more light, stage and market it well. And don't be afraid to offer some creative incentives. Investors, rethink your ROI. Look for opportunities in larger units with realistic rents, especially if you're in it for the long haul. And now, let's take a closer look at detached home sales in Toronto and surrounding areas. In Toronto, average selling price of a detached home in April was $1.71 million, almost 6% decline compared to April of last year. The amount of sold properties was down by 4.6%. Amount of new listings went up by 16%. On average, it takes 19 days for a detached home to be sold in Toronto today. Average selling price of a detached home in Vaughan in April was $1.83 million. 0.7% decrease compared to April of last year, so basically prices did not change from last April. The sales went down by 21%, amount of new listings were up by 10.6%. On average, it takes 24 days for a detached home to be sold in Vaughan today. Richmond Hill, average selling price in April was $1.92 million, 9% decrease compared to April of last year. Sales were down by 33%, new listings were up by 7.7%. On average, it takes 23 days for a detached home to be sold in Richmond Hill today. In Mississauga, average selling price of a detached home in April was $1.45 million, 10% decline compared to April of last year. Sales were down by 22.6%, inventory was down by 2.5%. On average, it takes 3 weeks for a detached home to be sold in Mississauga today. In Markham, average selling price of a detached home in April was $1.74 million, 4.6% decrease compared to April of last year. Sales were down by 21%, inventory was up by 19%. On average, it takes 25 days for a detached home to be sold in Markham today. In Newmarket, average selling price of a detached home in April was $1.34 million, 4.7% decrease compared to April of last year. Sales were down by 35%. Inventory was also down by 15%. On average, it takes 42 days for a detached home to be sold in Newmarket today. In Aurora, average selling price of a detached home in April was $1.56 million, 9% decrease compared to April of last year. Sales were down by 14%. Inventory went up by 2.4%. On average, it takes around 3 weeks for a detached home to be sold in Aurora today. Innisfil, average selling price of a detached home was $1.09 million, 17% increase compared to April of last year. Sales were down by 28.5%, inventory went up by 15.9%. On average, homes are sitting for 40 days on the market before sold. King City, average selling price of a detached home compared to last April went down by 3.4% and was sitting at $1.9 million in April. Sales were down by 50%, inventory went up by 21%. On average, it takes 22 days for a detached home to be sold in King City today. In Bradford, average selling price of a detached home in April was $1.06 million, 16.6% decline compared to April of last year. Sales were down by 54%. New listings were up by 3.2%. On average, it takes 24 days for a detached home to be sold in Bradford today. Average selling price of a detached home in Milton in April was $1.29 million. Prices went down by 6% compared to April of last year. Sales were down by 27% and inventory went up by 23%. On average, it takes 22 days for a detached home to be sold in Milton today. In Stoufville, average selling price of a detached home in April was $1.51 million. 7.5% decrease in price compared to April of last year, 34% down in sales, and inventory was up by 2.52%. On average, it takes 30 days for a detached home to be sold in Stoufville today. In Barrie, average selling price of a detached home in April was $817,000, 11% decrease in price compared to last April. Sales were down by 23.5%. Inventory was down by almost 10%. On average, it takes 28 days for a detached home to be sold in Barrie today. In Oakville, Average selling price of detached home in April was $2 million, almost 6% decrease in price compared to April of last year. Sales were down by almost 40%, new listings were down by 1.4%. On average, it takes 24 days for a detached home to be sold in Oakville today. And that's your April 2025 Greater Toronto Area Real Estate Update. I hope this helped you get a clear picture of what's going on out there. If you're thinking of buying, selling, or just want a deep dive into your neighborhood, reach out. Always happy to chat. Until next time, stay smart, stay safe, and let the data guide you. If you'd like to receive your own personalized sales report about home sales in your neighborhood, please call me at 647-801-3401 or email me at sold@fuadhomes.com. Thanks for watching and see you next month.